The world will now expect the Assad regime to live up to its public commitments.
Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart announcing today a deal to destroy Syria's chemical weapons. With me, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor John Bolton. Good evening, Ambassador.
Good evening, Jeanine.
Is it realistic, as Secretary Kerry says, to expect the Assad regime to live up to these commitments?
Certainly not, especially when it comes from Russia, which hasn't lived up to its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention since it came into force in the mid-1990s. The Russians, most experts believe, did not fully disclose its chemical weapons stockpile back then, nor has it ceased working on next-generation chemical weapons. So the idea that Russia is going to help guarantee this deal with Syria is comical on its face.
And when there is a statement, I believe, by Senator Graham, who said that Putin has created a box canyon for the United States. Do you think and agree that he's forced us into a corner?
Well, I think you have to look at it as where we stand right now. The president, our president, has not achieved his objectives. He has not exacted retribution against the Assad regime for crossing his red line and killing innocent civilians. And the absence of a strike has also manifestly not created a deterrent effect on Assad or anybody else for the use of weapons of mass destruction. Ever since August the 21st, President Obama has not talked about getting Syria to give up its chemical weapons. He's talked about dissuading and deterring future use. So that's not even in the picture. And Russia's main interest is keeping Assad in power, and that they've done. And the implementation of this agreement, if it goes forward, will simply help that objective as well. So I think Russia's in the driver's seat, and we're just watching the world go by.
And with the identification of chemical weapons, as you know, the UN, that was doing the investigating hasn't even reported what its findings are. How do we know that we have everything? How do we know if they're not, aren't they moving this stuff around now? And how easy is it to take chemical weapons out of a country where they're in the middle of a civil war, bombing and shooting each other?
Well, the Assad regime is almost certainly moving the weapons around, and they will almost certainly give a false declaration. Look, I've spent a lot of time dealing with weapons of mass destruction. I've worked with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. They have never undertaken a weapons destruction project like this. Never. Nothing even close. So all the confident predictions about schedules and how soon the weapons are going to be destroyed are nothing but guesswork at this stage. I think this is a long trap that we've gotten into. The Russian objective was to buy time for the Assad regime. I think they've succeeded in that. So for those who wanted, and I didn't agree with the idea of helping the rebels, but for those who wanted the rebels helped to destabilize Assad, this goes in exactly the other direction. By the way, contrary to the president's own objective, because he said he wants Assad overthrown.
And what about Iran? As Iran is sitting there watching this, watching, its patron Russia come to the, protection of Syria, how do you think Iran is looking at this in terms of its own nuclear enrichment?
Well, I think they're shaking their head at the Obama administration's inability to deliver on a threat once delivered. The Obama presidency has said over and over again with respect to Iran's nuclear weapons program, all options are on the table. Now, Iran has never believed that the president would use force against that nuclear weapons program. Here you have a use of a weapon of mass destruction, and even then, President Obama can't bring himself to use force. The objective or the end result of the U.S.-Russia agreement will be more negotiation. So from Iran's point of view, at some stage, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, they'd love to get back into negotiations with the United States, get the sanctions reduced, and watch their nuclear weapons program proceed. So I think they're counting this in Tehran. I think they're counting this agreement in Geneva today as another win for them.
And the rest of the world, how are they looking at us now, Ambassador? I mean, you've been in the rooms where decisions and negotiations have gone on. How do you think the rest of the world sees us tonight?
I think in amazement. I just came back from a week in the Persian Gulf region this morning, and our friends in in that region just have their heads in their hands in dismay at the vacillation, the flip-flopping, the indecisiveness of the Obama White House. And they're very worried what the implications are for them, especially coming back to that Iranian nuclear weapons program, which is very, very close to crossing the finish line.
Exactly. All right, Ambassador Bolton, thanks so much for being with us this evening. And coming up, we're going to continue with this.